Good morning, distinguished guests, respected scholars, and colleagues. I hope we are all set to begin, especially after battling the traffic. Let me begin with a simple question. If a student in Pune studies a program designed in Australia, co-taught by a faculty in Europe, and collaborates with classmates from Asia and Africa, where exactly is the classroom? The answer, of course, is everywhere, across nations, across continents. This is the reality of transnational education today. Universities are no longer just national institutions. They are global knowledge networks that connect ideas, cultures, and learners across borders. And that is precisely why gatherings like this conference are so important, because they help us reflect on how higher education is evolving in an interconnected world. With this, I, Sophia Gaikwad, head Symbiosis Teaching Learning Resource Center, welcome all of you to the 3-day conference on internationalization of higher education, with the theme for this year, Transnational Education in Transition, Practices, Policies, and Perspectives. Dr. Vidya Arodekar is the Principal Director of Symbiosis Society and Honorable Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International University. A transformative leader, she oversees the global education ecosystem here with 55,000 plus students across multiple campuses in India and Dubai. Ma'am, may I invite you? Thank you.
So very good morning to all of you. Sorry we are delayed. Generally we are very punctual and we should have started at 9:30 sharp. But unfortunately the road to this university is not in our hands. Though I had already mentioned to the Commissioner of PMRDA that we will build the road, we could have done it faster, but it's the last 6 months since the work is going on. So I'm sure you know how we function in India, and it just takes time and therefore people get stuck up. So the chief guest as well as our vice chancellor, both of them are stuck up in a traffic jam, but we'll start. So let me first welcome you on behalf of Symbiosis International University. You can see a lot of friends who are here and who keep coming to Symbiosis specifically for this conference on internationalization of higher education that we've been conducting for the last several decades. And I'm glad that this year we've chosen a topic that is too much under discussion, with pros and cons, with different views of different people, and we just felt that, while transnational education is so much discussed, let us bring this topic in an academic discourse, and therefore the conference over the next 3 days. Today, of course, are young researchers who will be presenting their papers, so this is like a pre-conference, and this is the opening of the pre-conference, and tomorrow and day after, we will have actual panel discussions by experts, erudite speakers, and we will bring in views of the government as well as the different state governments, because there are states who also now have been really in the forefront of higher education and more specifically transnational education. This topic is also close to our hearts because we've been kind of a participant university in the transnational education. We recently set up a campus in Dubai just 2 years ago in 2024. And the pangs that we had to go through, the challenges that we had to go through, of course, I will speak in more elaborately during my session. But it's not easy to set up a campus, which appears very easy, but not very easy to set up a campus abroad. But then transnational education is not all about setting up campuses abroad, it's much more, and that's exactly what we need to know. What Sophia said is very right. I think students are very lucky. Students in the higher education ecosystem in present times, I would say, are really, really lucky. I don't think any one of us sitting here, of course, barring a few young people, but specifically Dr. Varghese, me, and some of the senior vice chancellors, haven't really seen what went through a transnational education, because we were confined to our classrooms, confined to the same teachers who came and taught a subject, confined to the curriculum that was prescribed by the affiliating university and nothing beyond. But I would say the present students are really lucky that not only that they go through and are in the process of transnational education, but more importantly, the exposure that they get a global exposure, not just in the classrooms, but even outside of classrooms, with so much of diversity in the ecosystem of university campuses, is something that not just brings in the academic environment, which is good, but I think it also builds their personalities into becoming global citizens. And that is exactly what we are going to talk about and discuss about, and bring in policy matters that we can submit to the Government of India to see how this transnational education really affects these young people who are participants of this education. How does it affect faculty members who are participants of this transnational education? And lastly, how does it affect institutions? What does it really bring to an institution or a university to create its own campus in a foreign land? Is it something which is commercial? Is it something which is for status? Or is it something which is the desire of the university to be a participant in the global discourse of higher education? So there are different facets and different views, and I think bringing in these different views into an auditorium like this, and with a lot of participant and participation from young people, I think will really make this 3 days meaningful and resourceful. We also have a roundtable this evening of senior leadership from different universities and other participants from various bodies like FICCI and Services Export Promotion Council and many others, where we also want to talk about various facets that may not have been captured in the real definition of transnational education. I'm sure Dr. Muzumdar, when he talks about it tomorrow, will bring in very innovative thought processes of transnational education. Recently, me and Neeta spent about half an hour with him discussing, and something that we've really not brought into any of the literature that is moving around. He thought of it, and I'm sure all of you will enjoy what his thought process on transnational education is all about. I was also at a meeting recently organized by the Maharashtra government, the Chief Minister's office, where a huge delegation from Canada, led by the Prime Minister of Canada, was in Mumbai. And over lunch, there was, of course, a lot of presentations that were done by various departments of the government of Maharashtra. And what was really exciting was that for the first time, at least for me, for the first time ever, when I saw a government-led presentation, 80% of the presentation, Dr. Verghese, was on higher education. I mean, it was really, really something that I felt very happy about, that, here is so much of importance being given to higher education after a long time by a state which generally makes presentations on business, trade, and industry, etc. But this time, 80% of the presentation was on higher education and on how EduCity has been created in the state of Maharashtra, and how the Maharashtra state has invited so many foreign universities to establish their campuses, and 4 of them already, on the shores in the state already there. And therefore, it was very, very exciting to see this very different discourse of discussions, which I had personally never seen before. And an open invitation again to the Canadian universities, because there were a large number of vice chancellors from Canadian universities, some top-ranking Canadian universities, and the Chief Minister actually welcoming them with open arms to say that please come and set up your campuses. Now, there again in the audience, there were different views, and I felt that how right we were to focus on transnational education for this conference on internationalization of higher education. So I'm sure you all will enjoy the next 3 days. You will carry back great memories, not just of the conference, but of this beautiful campus of Symbiosis International University. I'm sure many of you who keep coming every year to this university also see the dynamism of the university, the different changes that we do on the campus, the new additions of a Symbiosis Medical College for Girls with a 900-bedded hospital, and different things that we keep doing on the campus, because as much as academics should be dynamic, we feel a university campus should also be equally dynamic, and we need to keep growing, not just by size, but also by academic institutions. So once again, let me welcome all of you to this 3 days of discourse on transnational education. And we hope that at the end of the 3 days, all of us together can really be clear on what it exactly means, and also submit some kind of policy document to both the state government as well as the government of India. With the new education policy focusing on internationalization of higher education, and many of us being in various discussions when the draft policy was being made, really feel happy that for the first time ever in any national level policy, so much of importance has been given to internationalization of higher education, which is very close to our hearts. And therefore, I think with the NEP and about 5 years, we also need to see what the impact of this NEP has been on higher education in India. And I think, again, this is at the right time that at the end of 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, how has it really impacted students, faculty members, institutions, programs, and the whole higher education ecosystem of India? So let me welcome you once again, and thank you, Neeta, for organizing. I must, put it on record, which I will do again tomorrow at the inaugural, the efforts taken by Dr. Neeta Inamdar. We all know her. She was with Manipal University. She came here on a sabbatical for a year. And I think I always say in my speech that the sands of symbiosis or the soil of symbiosis is like the sands of Hawaii. Once it gets into your shoes, it doesn't take you away from symbiosis. Now she's a full-time professor, a research professor with us, heading the Symbiosis Center for Higher Education Research and Policy Advocacy. So thank you, Neeta, for organizing such a wonderful conference. God bless.
Thank you, ma'am, for those reflective thoughts and also raising some pertinent questions. I also take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence and also welcome Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ramakrishnan Raman, who is also the mentor for this conference. And he has been recently ranked number 3 among the top 200 higher education influencers on LinkedIn in India. So your encouraging presence means a lot to us. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Rajni Gupte and Dr. Bhama Venkatramani. Gupte ma'am was the former Vice Chancellor, and Dr. Bhama ma'am was the Dean Academics and Administration. Both of them together, I think, carry at least half a century of experience contributing to Symbiosis. Ma'am, we are so grateful that you're here. I will now call upon Dr. Neeta Inamdar to provide us an overview of the conference and the intellectual journey that lies ahead. Dr. Neeta.
So a very good morning to everyone present here. Respected Vidya ma'am, Dr. Raman, Vice Chancellor, who finally made it through the traffic to reach us before we start for the opening ceremony. So, Vidya ma'am, I was to give the overview of the conference. You did it all. So I don't know, but I'll still speak a little bit about how we decided to go for this particular topic. We started working maybe in August last year when we thought of what this particular conference should be about. We had some brainstorming session and with Vidya ma'am, and then we decided to look at the phenomenon that is unfolding before our eyes. Why not take it up for study? And we decided not only to bring in the practitioners or the thought leaders who are into transnational education, but also bring in academics as to how are they making sense of this entire thing. Therefore, this first day was conceived. Otherwise, IHE conference has been for 2 days, and generally it happens in the main. Tomorrow we are all going to meet there with around 500, 600 people attending this conference in the auditorium, the SIU auditorium there. But this one was very special because we thought we should also bring in academics. And just a small correction, today it's not young academics who are presenting, there are senior academics as well, like Professor Shauman, and then we have Dr. Hebani. There are quite a few very senior professors also who will make sense of what is unfolding before our eyes in these very interesting times. On one hand, there are global conflicts which almost come to bring the international education to a halt, or at least it appears so. Universities under attack, and students finding it difficult to navigate through these times. But still, the energy of the youth, the energy of the universities that still believes in the universalistic values that universities have always had. And that is something substantial, and that is what energizes all of us to even think of transnational education in times like this. And that, I think, something is very, very beautiful about this particular conference. We refuse to give up when it comes to connecting and generating a knowledge that is for peace building, for nation building. And there's also, maybe we also, those who have time, we can also visit the Rotary Peace Center, where we are going to have a program that's specifically focused on peace building. And probably education is one of the very important means when we do that. So therefore we thought of this, and we also signed up. We decided to go a little more academic. This time, Dr. Vidya and I plan to edit one book, which is being published by an international publisher. And we called for proposals in the month of October. By November, we had some of the finest proposals. We already have received chapters for this book from some people like Professor Jane Knight, Professor Hans David, Professor Varghese, Professor Hebani. A lot of people have already contributed. So the book is going to be one of the knowledge outputs of the conference. And we also signed up with Springer Nature, the Discover Education team. Are you there? Priyanka, and so please see them, because they are the ones who are publishing the outcome of this conference. There's also going to be a journal, that is special edition of a journal being brought out by Discover. And apart from that, we have also brought out one report, which is a 77-page report on transnational education, which is in your bag already. And this is one of the knowledge products of the conference. And I wish you go through it, because some of these people, some of the young scholars have tried to study 6 higher education hubs in Qatar, in Dubai, in Malaysia, Singapore, Mauritius, and India. 6 hubs have been studied, and important close observations that have been brought out and presented in this particular report. I hope the report gives kind of an overview and prepares us all for the 2-day deliberations that also lie ahead tomorrow and day after. Today's is more academic. We have the paper presentations beginning very soon, and I hope you will enjoy. So we have designed it in such a way, we tried to cover as much as we can. So today it's a very multiple perspectives that are coming in today and during the paper presentations. But tomorrow we have the first session where we will unpack the idea of transnational education conceptually, as to how is it conceptually different from international education. From there we move on to get the views from those who have established campuses in India. We have 6 people who have established campuses in India. How do they see the phenomenon unfolding in India? Then we have Indian universities that have established campuses. Vidya ma'am is there, Dr. Prabhu is there from Manipal. So we have a lot of people who are coming in together to speak about the experience of the Indian universities establishing campus abroad. Dr. Vijay Khare is also there, because SPPU has also had its international exploration. So after that, we are also discussing what is the impact of this TNE on individuals, that is students and faculty members. We're also going to look at the impact on institutions. Is it particularly the public universities, what's the impact? What's the impact on private universities? And then we also think of, we're also looking at the regulatory bodies. Vidya ma'am and I have discussed this earlier, as to how regulatory bodies in different contexts function. And is there a possibility of having a forum where these regulatory bodies in different territories are able to have a conversation and make this possible, more feasible, and facilitation easy and without the asymmetry that is otherwise visible. So those are the things those are discussions that we are going to have ahead. And maybe at the end of the 3-day conference, if you can come out with something like a declaration on transformational nature of transnational education. So can we have a declaration on transformational transnational education at the end of the 3-day period is something that I place before you. We'll continue discussions, and look forward to very engaging discussions. I see some of the finest scholars. I'm really, really delighted about the conversations that lie ahead. So welcome each one of you once again, and thank you for making it, despite all traffic, congestion, everything, but this is a beautiful place, trust me. I have my office in the same building. I don't want to go back home. That's beautiful. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day ahead.
So the session one we start is on emerging models and plurality of perspectives. So I call upon my colleague, Dr. Shweta, and Dr. Sulakshana. I think Dr. Shweta is presenting the paper on transnational education, hidden depths.
Good morning, and thank you so much for being here at Symbiosis, everyone, and also for the opportunity for me to literally start the conference and the conversations on transnational education. First of all, for organizing this very apt conference on the conversations on transnational education. There is a lot of conversation, as you've been hearing, on this idea of transnational education and what does it mean for the student, for the universities, as well as for academics such as us who look at education not just in context of the consumable good that it has become, but also as something that contributes to the society in the larger space. Here, what Dr. Sulakshana and I are trying to do is unfold the cultural perspectives on transnational education. What I have tried to do is bring in my anthropological lens to looking at education. And I'm drawing essentially here from the idea of the iceberg model of culture, which was put forth in 1976 by Edward Hall. And when he talks about culture, he puts forth this quote where, I'll try not to read that because it's there and I will land up losing time. So what he tries to talk about is that the fact that technology is yet not able to take care of the kind of cultural construct that's happening in 1976. And if I talk about it today, it's a very similar scenario, right? So while technology is growing, we are still talking about critical thinking. You have AI, but you need human beings to think more about it. Keeping that in mind, what we thought of was looking at compounding all of this is the hidden depth of our lived experience, which we call culture. Now, how does this hidden depth really translate into transnational education? Yeah. So the paper will try and follow this structure. I'll give you a brief introduction on transnational research, gaps in the literature, look at education in the 21st century, and then discuss the frameworks of hidden depths, go into India, and a way forward. It is, when I talk about culture, it is within these hidden depths that we are situating our reflections on transnational education. Now, what is transnational education? Transnational education or cross-border education? Yes. Transnational education or cross-border education refers to the provision of academic programs by an institution located in one country to students situated in another without requiring their physical mobility. Instead, the education institute itself moves across borders through mechanisms such as branch campuses, franchised programs, or online delivery programs. Jane Knight and others have also come up with various organizational modalities. What we are focusing on specifically here is the international branch campuses, which through her work in 2019, along with others, she has situated it as IPPM, that is International Provider and Mobility Programs. Now, when I look at the objectives of my study, they essentially evolve from this gap that there are existing perspectives that are essentially top-down. They are framing TNE in a socio-cultural vacuum with limited focus on the human quotient, the students, the faculty members, staff, and the community within which the TNE is essentially situated. The focus is on economic outcomes, employability, and global competitiveness, rather than lived experiences and local engagement. And the conceptualization of cultural contexts, therefore, in which these TNEs are situated, seems to be under-theorized and limited in scholarly discourse, though I would have to acknowledge that there is this conversation that is coming up where we are focusing a little more on culture. The objective, therefore, is to address this absence of cultural contextualization by highlighting the need for policy frameworks that integrate both societal and cultural dimensions within the economic priorities. It could contribute as a recommendation in framing the way forward, particularly in the Indian context, where we feel that TNE is evolving, but yet nascent in its way forward. Now, when I look at contextualizing TNE, we can look at it in three perspectives: the macro, the meso, and the micro level. The macro is essentially the global dynamics from which international or transnational education is evolving. The meso is the institutional mechanisms and within the regional context as well as the national context. And the micro is the local community and the individual, which is where actually these interactions are taking place within the framework of the macro and the meso. When I move beyond this, I am looking at the economics of education in the 21st century skill building and contextualizing it, associating it, integrating it with the idea of the third mission of higher education. Now, what is the third mission of higher education? It is essentially trying to move beyond the individual and the competitive to the social and the collective ideology of what education was meant to be, right? So we are looking at education both as skill building as well as a social phenomenon in a way that contributes to social change. HEIs over time have remained social as well as a cultural critique of the existing political, economic, as well as the social dynamics. And taking that forward, I would like to place this whole conversation within this particular model of the iceberg, where we are looking at institutional structures as the superstructure or the surface that is visible, which is where we are looking at policy partnerships, infrastructures, and program credits as being the visible, successful perspectives in education. How does that really translate into the experiences of the different stakeholders as well as the programs that we are offering? So we've coined the idea of zones of tension and paradoxes, which evolve from the various intersections of society, employability, the economics, the politics of it. And what does it influence? These zones of tensions are visible within the program. So you have a curriculum which is not necessarily designed to the local needs. You have language. The language that you're using is not necessarily local to the population that is engaging with this education. And we need to understand that learning or knowledge seeking happens in your own language, right? If there is lack of understanding of language, you can't understand the nuances. Something as simple as pronunciations, learning is not going to happen. So the curriculum, the language, the pedagogical style, as well as assessments, all of these factors contribute to the learning process. And in this process of transnational education, especially when we are talking about international branch campuses, we are situating an international or a global ideology within a local framework, unfortunately not necessarily by incorporating the local within the global. Yes, 2 minutes. Okay, now what are the paradoxes that lead to? So we're talking about global universal and local particularism where knowledge, language, and pedagogy become a concern. We talk about mobilities, which are, so the idea is through an international program, you will become an internationally mobile individual, but that is not necessarily the case in reality, right? So there is a certain conflict that comes in between aspirations and the reality. And then there is the civilizational paradox, where the meta-narrative in most nations today is inward-looking, whereas the education that we are trying to promote through these branch campuses are very global and international. For me, then, that creates something called a deterritorialized institution and a deterritorialized learner. They are disconnected, they are disembedded. But that doesn't mean we need to push this away completely. It's like saying you should not throw the baby out with the bathwater. What do we need to do? We probably need to rethink about these branch campuses in terms of integrating it to the local culture, and by that logic, contributing to the third mission of higher education, which is extremely, extremely important. Quickly on to India. So we've just about the Indian scenario as to what is happening. Now, for me, what is the way ahead? It was interesting, when I was doing a little bit of research, there is this third-party international education provider, which is talking about how do you structure your education model to reach India. And this is what it says, right? The time to act is now, and success lies in understanding the cultural, economic, and aspirational nuances of Indian students. So it is not just about looking at higher education or transnational education in context of the economics of it, but it is extremely important to look at it from the cultural context. I think I'll quickly summarize my conclusion by reading a short paragraph. So to conclude, the research outlines the transnational education operates at the confluence that transnational education operates at the confluence of competing forces, including globalization and nationalism, empowerment and control, and standardization and contextualization. Its hidden depths reveal that it should neither be structured as singular nor perceived as a neutral education model, but a dynamic and contested space. Recognizing and engaging with these paradoxes is essential for developing more equitable, context-sensitive, and socially embedded forms of transnational education and branch campuses. Thank you.
I invite Ms. Bhuvesha, Mr. Wali, and Ms. Icha to present their paper on Between Global Ambition and Local Reality, Rethinking Education Hubs in Transnational Education.
A very good morning to the respected scholars and esteemed dignitaries present here. So our paper we will present it shortly by two of us. I will present the conceptual part of it, and then followed by Ms. Bhuvesha will take over it. It is pleasure to present our paper titled Between Global Ambition and Local Reality, Rethinking Education Hubs in Transnational Education. Before, just a small observation, what actually Mom discussed, we had some points that they are like mutually, we are also talking about the same points, which again gave us an understanding that the conferences as such and the gatherings as such, discussions as such, give us the platform to bring our ideas, which mainly are the same, and work for enhancing the transnational education in the form of policies and in the form of working papers. So this paper engages with the significant transformation in global higher education, namely the shift from institutional-led transnational education to increasingly state-driven education hubs. While these hubs are often celebrated as a symbol of progress and global integration, this paper takes a more critical stance. It asks that only what these hubs are, but more importantly, what they do, for whom, and to what extent they fulfill the development rules assigned to them by particular states. To begin with, transnational education, or TNE, is commonly defined as a provision of education where the learner is located in a country different from that of the awarding institution. However, this definition, while widely accepted, is largely descriptive and mobility focused. It tells us where education takes place, but not how it functions, who runs it, and who it benefits. Therefore, in this paper, we move beyond this structural definition and propose analyzing TNE through 5 critical pillars: accessibility, affordability, relevance, sustainability, and identity. These pillars allow us to interrogate TNE not merely as a system of cross-border delivery, but as a social, economic, and political project. For instance, accessibility asks whether TNE expands opportunities or reproduce existing inequities. Affordability interrogates whether access is meaningful or restricted to elite groups. Relevance examines whether programs align with national labor markets or global trends disconnected from local trends. Sustainability questions whether these models are viable in the long term or dependent on continuous external demand. And most importantly, identity explores how local educational system and epistemologies are reshaped or sometimes overshadowed by imported models. In this sense, TNE not only provides as a provider mobility, but it is about reconfiguration of knowledge, power, and access to global education. A key transformation in TNE lies in changing role of the state. Traditionally, internationalization of higher education was largely institution-driven, with state playing a facilitating or regulatory role. universities acted as autonomous agents expanding cross borders. However, in the context of education hubs, the state assumes a far more active, interventionist, and strategic role. This shift can be understood through the lens of political economy, where the state no longer is a passive regulator, but an architect of educational markets. Education hubs, therefore, represent from what we might call territorialized internationalization, where global education is not simply flowing across borders, but it is deliberately anchored within specific national spaces through policy and infrastructure. At the same time, this process is not purely state-controlled. Increasingly, we observe the involvement of private actors and commercial interests, leading to hybrid governance structure. For example, public education hubs, private developed education hubs, duly by public and by the government education hubs. These introduces a crucial complexity, which is that the education hubs are shaped not only by state ambition, but also by market logic and private capital. Thus, rather than viewing education hubs as purely state-led or purely market-driven, these should be understood as sites of interaction between multiple actors with different objectives. It is precisely within this intersection that tension begins to emerge. At this point, it is important to briefly distinguish between international branch campuses and education hubs, while also recognizing their interdependence. IBCs are typically expansion-oriented and embedded within global competition for students and revenue. They represent the micro-level actors of transnational education. Education hubs are in contrast operate at the macro level. They are designed through policy and intended to attract multiple institutions into a single ecosystem. However, rather than being separate models, IBCs often function as the building blocks of education hubs. This leads us to critical insights. Education hubs are not alternative to IBCs, but aggregation of institutional activity structured by the state strategy. This also means that the success of hubs depends not only on state planning, but also on how well institutional objectives align with national priorities. From a policy perspective, education hubs are framed as transformative national projects. They are embedded within broader narrative of economic diversification, transition of knowledge economies, global competitiveness, and innovation-led growth. In many cases, they are also linked to long-term national visions and development plans. Conceptually, this reflects what we might call developmental internationalization, where higher education is not merely internationalized for prestige or exchange, but it is strategically mobilized to achieve domestic developmental goals. However, this ambition operates within global context characterized by unequal knowledge flow, dominance of global north institutions, and competition for talent and capital. This raises a critical question. Can education hubs genuinely serve national development, or do they risk reproducing global hierarchies within local context? Furthermore, the ambition itself is often multi-layered. States do not pursue education hubs for a single purpose. Rather, these hubs simultaneously aim to educate citizens, attract international students, enhance global markets, and enhance global rankings and project international image. This multidisciplinary objectives create inherent tensions, particularly when these goals are not mutually compatible. At this point, having outlined the conceptual theoretical foundation, we are now turning to the empirical cases that we have examined in our paper, the two case studies of the Education Hub of Qatar and as well as of India, which Ms. Bhusha will take over.
Thank you for the comprehensive and detailed introduction about TNE and the involvement of state. So now let us look into the involvement, the cases of Qatar and cases of India. So first, why Qatar? In case of Qatar, the education city, which is established in Doha, is one of the earliest educational hub established in the year 1997, and it is completely state-driven, and that's the motive why we chose Qatar. And the objectives with which the education city is established are rapidly build world-class domestic higher education capacity, which is aligning more with the developmental aspect. Secondly, national capacity building, which is again aligning with the developmental motive of the state. Third, reduce outward student migration and project Qatar internationally as an open, knowledge-driven state, which is having more of a political motive. And lastly, produce graduates for the post-hydrocarbon knowledge economy, focusing on the disciplines ranging between STEM and the social science, that is the international affairs, which is again more of educational and economic in nature. So now we are going to understand, are the IBCs established within the education city aligning with any of these state objectives through the programs offered by the objectives? So here is a table. The IBCs established in Education City are focusing on STEM, medicine and social sciences. And these are the university, the Carnegie Mellon University, Weill Cornell Medicine, that offers 6-year medical program. And notably Qatar, the Education City in Qatar, is one of the educational hub that focuses also on social sciences, and it is not only STEM driven. However, though the IBCs are aligning with the state's discipline needs, focusing from STEM, medicine, social sciences, there is a limitation, that is oversupply than the required demand. Despite multi-million-dollar investment to develop this education hub, the total enrollment remains between 10,000 to 12,000 students, and the student population is around 380,000, which is 11% of the country's population, who cannot sustain the hub's enrollment on their own. And the education city rely more on international, that is the non-Qatari residents. That makes us to question critically whether education city develops Qatar's national capital or serve as an education amenity for expatriate majority. Now coming to the case of India, why we chose India is India is still in its evolving stage, and to understand the contemporary pattern of transnational education and how the state's involvement or state's motive behind the establishment of these hubs, namely the GIFT City in Gujarat and the Edu City in Navi Mumbai, we have chosen India as a case. According to NEP 2020, we have these objectives. Firstly, it is Make India Global Higher Education Hub that mainly focuses on offering premium education at affordable costs. Secondly, facilitate the availability of high-end human resources for financial services and technology. The first objective is more of political and economical in nature. Second, it is more of economic and developmental in nature. And the third objective, transition from consumption-led to innovation-led growth through education, which is of developmental in nature. Now, again, we are going to check the IBCs established within these hubs. Are they aligning with any of these objectives? So we have taken the cases of University of Wollongong, University of Aberdeen, which offers the courses on STEM. So in this early stage, the educational hubs mainly focuses on STEM, finance and business, where only few institutions which is established outside these education hubs are focusing on offering programs related to humanities and social sciences. Despite their aligning the need outlaid by the state, there is a limitation which we can understand through the graph. So the same MSc Cyber Security course offered by an premium Indian university charges rupees 2 lakh, but the Deakin University established within the GIFT City charged 25 lakhs per year. This portrays the disparity between the fee charged by the Indian University and the Deakin and the IBCs for the same course. Secondly, that is same for BSc Data Science, where I compared one of the Indian University and University of Aberdeen that charges 12 lakhs per year, and the same course is offered for 2 lakhs by the premium Indian University, like the domestic Indian University in India. In case of India, the limitation was the high prices of program that is offered. At the same time, though the program fee is less than or half less than the program fee offered at the home campuses, it is still not affordable to the domestic population, that is the domestic students. This could be affordable for those elite student groups who choose going abroad to gain an international degree, or who choose this IBCs as an alternative because of the prevailing geopolitical tensions such as conflicts and the consular constraints. Despite these limitations, in case of Qatar, we saw oversupply than the required demand, and in case of India, we saw the affordability and accessibility issue. Despite these, the two pillars which we discussed in the first slide, these limitations, what makes the education hub sustain goes beyond the economic and developmental rationale, and it is oriented towards strong geopolitical rationale and the international image attached towards it. So to conclude, there is a gap between the objective set and the functioning of IBCs within the hubs. And what appears to have started with the economic and national developmental rationale is not necessarily met, because the focus is more over the enhancement of positive perception or the image of the country at the global stage, rather than meeting the national capacity needs at the local level. So therefore, the existence of education hubs reflects more political and geopolitical ambitions rather than the required economic necessity. With this, we conclude our presentation, and these are our references. Thank you.
We now have an online presentation, and it's being presented by Dr. Pushkarni Panchamukhi and Dr. Aditya Kumar from Avi University, Bengaluru, and they are presenting their paper on global higher education as monopolistic competition, welfare and relocation effects on international branch campuses.
Thank you very much. I hope my screen is visible. And also thank you very much for this opportunity to present online. Unfortunately, I was not able to be present there and take the opportunity of this wonderful gathering. So let me start. We're looking at branch campuses, international branch campuses. We start off with an introduction as to how the concept or the idea of higher education as a merit good is being eroded very fast. Right? So higher education is now increasingly being viewed as a private good with a laissez-faire approach, and like we saw in the previous presentation, we are openly inviting higher education from abroad also, with an idea, of course, with an ignoble intention, however, not necessarily meeting the other aspirations in terms of development, etc. So I also conclude this slide by saying that somehow education, higher education, has been classified as merit too good and not merit good. So we bring in this idea of a monopolistic market, that higher education in our country is, or probably worldwide, is now witnessing the features, right? So where we have numerous sellers in the form of different universities, there is product differentiation. Products are close substitutes, but not necessarily identical. So each one of these, while they are actually presenting the features of a monopolistic market for firms, it's very true for higher education also. There are many low barriers to entry, etc. And there's also a lot of non-price competition in the form of advertising, branding, quality variations, etc. We see all of these in the higher education market, in quotes. And so, a bit on the number of universities, etc. We're seeing that India is definitely witnessing a mass explosion. But we also see how private enrollment, private universities are also gaining a lot of prominence. The theoretical framework that I would like to bring in now here, the two models that we have brought in, this is from the economics perspective. This is Dixit-Stiglitz's model, which was originally developed for international trade. And the idea was to explain how trade actually increases welfare. So Dixit-Stiglitz's model, it looks at a market which has differentiated products, and we are bringing in this particular understanding in the higher education context. So the firms are all operating under a monopolistic competition, where there are a lot of firms, firms as we discussed in the previous slide. But each firm has some sort of market power, which means that they can set the price, which is the fees, above marginal cost. And consumers, which are students in our case, they have love for variety. Yes, and implying that their welfare will increase as varieties will increase. The consumer preferences are represented using what is called as a constant elasticity of substitution utility function, which means that if this coefficient is high, then there is a lot of substitution among firms, which means what the students don't mind switching between universities, and the lower coefficient would imply that students are kind of firm about certain universities, preferences for certain universities. So to continue, the demand for each variety will obviously then depend on the price. So in our case, it's a certain program. Also, the price of other varieties. So similar programs are being offered by different universities, etc. The firms follow markup pricing, which means that it's not just about their cost, but they also have a markup over and above. And this depends on what we explained, the elasticity of substitution. So if a certain university has loyal students or a lot of demand, which means that there is a lot of inelasticity there. Free entry ensures, of course, that profit is zero in the long run equilibrium. Welfare will depend on the number of varieties which are available in the market and kind of fees that these universities are charging. Consumers or students, they value variety, like I said, and firms exploit differentiation, which lead to overall welfare. So this, in the specifically, like I said, in the trade context, makes it evident. But now, in the higher education context, if we observe, all of these are quite relevant. But we extend this and we also understand the Melitz model, and I will explain how both the Dixit-Stiglitz as well as the Melitz model are relevant for our particular context of higher education. So here, Melitz model brings in heterogeneity. In the Dixit-Stiglitz model, it's more about saying that all firms have similar cost functions. Whereas in the Melitz function, what comes out is they have heterogeneity in terms of their own productivity. So the firms differ in terms of their productivity, and which enables them to set different prices now. Right? So in typical scenario, which is not the higher education scenario, this would mean that firms have an advantage in lowering their prices, etc., and attracting consumers. However, what's very interesting in the higher education case is that despite higher productivity, low prices are rarely seen, in the sense that universities with high productivity also do not charge lower prices or fees. Instead, they charge high fees because they have a lot of advantage in doing so, coming to, which is linked with the elasticity of substitution, in fact. But here what happens is, when these kind of firms enter, they force the inefficient firms to leave the market in the Melitz model, right? Because they have an advantage in terms of their costing, and therefore the inefficient firms are forced to exit. So we would like to see how here productivity comes into the markup pricing here. Therefore, now the welfare gains are not just gains from variety, but also from efficiency. So both Dixit and Melitz model, they're applicable for higher education, and we'll see how. In the first case, when it comes to the Dixit-Stiglitz model, what is a little prominent is that a lot of higher education institutions are being invited by the government, yes, to open their shops. Now, the idea being that consumer welfare will increase, as Dixit model suggests, that more variety would mean higher consumer surplus or student welfare in our case. Student surplus, they have a lot of variety. So we see this feature very prominent in our country, in our economy. But Melitz model is going ahead and saying that it's not just the variety that's increasing, but we also have firms which are, like I said, heterogeneous by nature in terms of what? In terms of all of these different ideas which define their quality. Yes, student learning outcomes, undergraduate outcomes, placement support, research opportunities, community impact, global outlook. All of these are defining these different universities. So then, coming to international branch campuses, we see there are different things or different objectives that they hope to meet: enhanced access, enhanced variety, but also taking advantage of the market segmentation and pricing. Like we saw in the previous session, this segment typically caters to students with higher willingness to pay, often positioned in the premium segment of the education market. So, yeah, this is just an overview of how it is in India. So we saw already that the courses mostly offered are highly commercially viable programs, right? And the location clusters are also, this is important for us, where they are located, because we'll see what kind of segmentation actually is existing already in the higher education market that will, play kind of, how the different stakeholders are going to be affected. So our objective is to actually understand and capture the gains accrued to higher education sector domestically through establishment of international branch campuses, specifically to consumers, which are students or parents, faculty surplus, as well as domestic university surplus. So we're looking at how does this impact the domestic universities. So we have the total surplus, we've put this as a sum of consumer surplus or student surplus, faculty surplus and producer surplus. We bring in these mathematical terms, but to explain this slide, it's to put it simply, consumer surplus will refer to the benefits that students will receive when the value of education they gain is greater than the price they pay. Our faculty surplus will represent the share of institutions operating gains that is allocated to faculty members. That could be through salaries, incentives, or other academic benefits, given exposure to global research, etc. Producer surplus, and we're talking about domestic universities. This is the surplus that is shared by the domestic universities after covering for all faculty payments, operating surplus, fixed costs, all of that. So in simple terms, total surplus captures how the benefits generated by the institution are distributed among students, faculty and university, which provides a measure of the overall welfare and efficiency. So now here, this is an important slide that I have, is that universities, like I said, are already segmented in our country, with a clear. Sometimes they are in between, but they are almost compartmentalized like this, where there are low prices, meaning low fees, and high quality, low price, low quality, high price, high quality, high price, low quality, moderate price, and low quality. And I'm trying to look at the impact on welfare as measured through consumer surplus, faculty surplus, and domestic university producer surplus through price, and depending on their price and quality, where they are placed in this segment. Right? So in the first, which is low price and high quality, typically we could think of some eminent universities, institutions like the IITs here, and what will happen if branch campuses enter. So I'm writing here that the student surplus will increase. And why I say this? So we know that these institutions have limited capacity in terms of seats. So the students in this segment, they prefer high quality. Demand in that sense is very inelastic, right? But they do not mind shifting to other institutions which offer similar quality. So the demand is very sensitive to quality of education rather than price. So they don't mind shifting to similar quality institutions, a lot of them. So there is there is a strong possibility, probability that consumers or students will move to international branch campuses, given assumption that the quality is high.
I hate to interfere, ma'am, but I think you'll have
Yeah.
to conclude. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Similarly, low price, low quality will have, it will have absolutely no impact as such, because these students are in a different segment altogether. Now, high price, high quality. Again, here I say that consumer surplus will increase, faculty surplus will also increase as a result of branch campuses. So what's happening here is, some elite institutions, so we can see if students don't get admissions here, they have option here, so which means consumer surplus is increasing through variety, international branch campuses. Faculty surplus increases because employment opportunities increase for faculty who would like to be engaged in high quality institutions. But what's very interesting is high price and low quality segment. A lot of them function in NCR area, and we could say that they might exit. According to the Melit's model, these universities might exit. But the moderate and the low quality, moderate price and the low quality is another segment which will continue to thrive, because these students, for them it doesn't really matter international branch campuses enter or not, because they are not going to move from moderate price to high price. So we say in that sense the demand here is inelastic with respect to fees, the price. So to conclude, some of these implications is, in the Melit's model, all firms with low productivity are forced to exit the market, but the higher education market, owing to a clear segmentation, there is no exit of poor quality institutions with low or moderate price. But there is a likely exit of high price, low quality institutions. Student welfare may increase owing to increase in access, and IBCs have an impact on surplus of students with high ability to pay. So the segment that they are probably going to impact positively in terms of more variety is only those students who have high ability to pay. Therefore, unless IBCs have student welfare policies or scholarships for the underserved, there is no impact for this particular segment of the underserved communities. So the government must continue to invest in higher education to fill this gap. And we discuss a lot about this in our paper as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Indeed, very insightful. I'll just take a minute to share briefly the profile of the chair. Professor Varghese is a distinguished visiting professor at Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, and a consultant at the Center for Social and Economic Progress. He is the former Vice Chancellor of the National Institute of Educational Planning and Administration, NIPA, New Delhi, and founding director of its Center for Policy Research in Higher Education. An internationally recognized expert in education policy, planning, and financing, he has led global research and editorial boards and major collaborative networks. I now call upon the scholars who are going to present their papers in this session. First one, we have Dr. Pushkarni Panchamukhi and Dr. Aditya Kumar. They are presenting a paper on global higher education as monopolistic competition, welfare and relocation effects of international branch campuses. May I now invite Professor Varghese to kindly share his remarks, and maybe we could take a couple of questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Friends, we had 3 very good papers presentations made. It's very important to see the type of discussions that have taken place and highlighted some of the important issues. I'll try to pick up 3 issues, and I also try to put a framework for analysis of internationalization and branch campuses, at a later stage. One is that the question that was made in the first paper by Sweta and others on the social and collective versus the market. I think that is an important dimension that needs to be further explored. I think the whole issue of internationalization in the context of globalization, nobody mentioned about it, is that how market mediates in education, where education becomes a commodity to be sold whether to the international market or to the national market, That is the issue. And I am happy that this was highlighted. The second paper tried to talk about accessibility, affordability, etc. But my feeling is that the branch campuses are not contributing substantially to improving access. Because if you see the universities in India and if you see the branch campuses in India, in many universities, many seats are lying vacant. This is the case in many. I can go by state and say that. And if you take teacher education nationally, you will find that a large number of seats are lying vacant. So it is not lack of places that these branch campuses are coming. And therefore, it's a question of affordability versus, as Pushkarni had put very clearly, the questions of low quality, high prices, and high quality, low prices, and moderate quality, etc. That is around the place where we will be playing around in terms of the branch campuses. I think what is important to notice is that universities traditionally perform two functions. One is knowledge production, other is knowledge transaction. And I think even today, these two functions continue to be performed. What has made change is the change in terms of the knowledge production processes. If we use the classical models, knowledge production has moved from mode 1 to mode 2, which means that it is not super specialization in a single subject area or departmentalism that is most important for expanding knowledge, but it is the interdisciplinarity and moving away from a single discipline-oriented knowledge production to others. So there is a democratization process that has taken place in the knowledge production, but this is very limited. So for example, if you consider what is called as the world-class universities, they have not expanded substantially in the last 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. The expansion has not taken place in such universities. Whether you take Harvard, Stanford, Oxford, Cambridge, etc., you find that their enrollment has not substantially increased. So world-class universities and what we call as the elite universities creates elitism in terms of knowledge production and tries to keep it concentrated in the limited number of institutions. Yesterday I was discussing about the research publications in India. Although we have around 1,300 or 1,400 universities, actually if you look at the publication and which universities are publishing, not more than 150 universities are involved in the knowledge production. So in other words, what I am trying to say is that the mode of knowledge production has changed, but its concentration and elite culture and elite nature has not changed. So the question in higher education, whether the foreign institutions are coming to this place or not, it is very important that are we in a position to democratize knowledge production through the process of branch campuses? That is one question. The second question that is very important for researchers to analyze and understand is that knowledge transaction sector has increased. But unfortunately, it is here what Swati and others mentioned in the initial stages as social and collective becomes very important. We have forgotten the social functions of higher education in the process of transacting knowledge. How do we reposition higher education institutions and universities in the process of knowledge production, in the process of knowledge transaction, whereby social functions are included? What is happening is that unless you express the social functions today through a market process, it is not acceptable to the institutions. The government has withdrawn, not only in terms of the amount of money that is allocated or the budgetary allocations. The government has withdrawn even in terms of the regulatory functions and the proactive functions that the government is supposed to play to link higher education with society, to link higher education with the community, to link higher education which is affordable to all people. We talk about massification of higher education, we talk about universalization of higher education. But this is becoming a market-oriented process, deviated from the social functions, deviated from the public functions that we are trying to provide, That is why the question that was posed by Pushkarani in the beginning, the public good versus private good or public good versus non-public good becomes very important. I think with or without the branch campuses, there is a need for us to reconnect higher education with the social functions, which it has played traditionally in societies, which it needs to play, which needs to be strengthened. I also like to say that I don't think that the branch campuses are going to contribute substantially to knowledge production. And if you look at the research component of the branch campuses, not only here, even the most well-developed branch campus in Dubai, I was a board member for 7-8 years in that 23 campuses, So what you find is that what is focused is the knowledge transaction. Because knowledge transaction has a revenue generating capacity which knowledge production do not have. Unless knowledge production is in a position to reap the scarcity rent that pays, for the companies. When it is produced in my company, that is why many of the companies have their own R&D functions. I will not share it with others. Not sharing in knowledge production is advantageous and maximizes your profit. But sharing in knowledge transaction maximizes your profit. This is a theoretical way of looking at and how do we analyze the situation of branch campuses or higher education put in a marketplace, whether it is branch campuses or even elite private institutions, becomes very important. So I don't think that branch campuses or the market process in higher education is going to make it more affordable, but it will make it more elite. And when higher education is expanding, massifying, and getting universalized, the graduates from these elite campuses will be enjoying a much higher premium in the labor market than those who are coming from ordinary, regular public institution, which used to be the pattern. And that is the change that is taking place. And the branch campuses contribute substantially to this change that I am talking about, without substantially contributing to democratization of knowledge production. That is what I feel to look at, because all of you are researchers, to look at some of these issues more rather than getting into the functioning of branch campuses or the cost-benefit analysis of branch campuses, little more theoretically try to see that what actually it means in terms of knowledge production and knowledge transaction that is taking place. I'll stop here. Thank you.